The greatest pain in this world rarely comes from strangers, but from the very bloodline that ruthlessly tramples your dignity. I am Bethany, a 29-year-old financial analyst who always believed family meant unconditional loyalty. My reality shattered the moment my biological parents sat in my living room to deliver the most vicious lie imaginable. They looked my husband dead in the eye with fake sympathy, claiming that Bethany had been pregnant 4 times with 4 different men before marrying you. This toxic manipulation worked instantly because my spouse blindly trusted their fabricated narrative without giving me any chance to explain. He immediately threw the divorce papers onto our dining table while staring at me with absolute disgust. I refused to shed a single tear or offer a pathetic defense to people who had already convicted me. I picked up the pen to sign those legal documents with a freezing calmness before walking out forever. My biological family genuinely believed destroying my marriage would break my spirit to force me back under their financial control. Exactly 1 week after my departure, a massive bank acceleration notice demanding the repayment of a $57,000 debt arrived at their doorstep. I had officially revoked my status as their financial co-signer due to the recent divorce proceedings. My mother instantly collapsed to the floor upon realizing they were losing their home, while my father desperately called my phone. He choked on his own pathetic panic over the receiver as he begged me to please save us. If you want to know how I legally dismantled their toxic manipulation without a single drop of forgiveness, welcome to revenge mode. Make sure to hit that subscribe button right now to follow my complete journey of ultimate financial payback. Approaching my 30th birthday, I foolishly believed achieving total financial independence would finally establish a permanent boundary against my greedy relatives. The entire foundation of this tragedy revolves around my husband Trevor, along with my father, my mother, and my older brother Jason. Several years ago, my parents secretly took out a massive secondary mortgage to rescue Jason from a disastrously failing business venture. They carelessly gambled their own retirement property just to protect him from declaring total bankruptcy without ever consulting me about the severe risks involved. Their reckless financial decisions eventually caught up to them when the banking institution threatened to foreclose on their home after multiple missed payments. They begged me for salvation using every guilt trip imaginable regarding family loyalty, so I made the single most devastating mistake of my adult life. I reluctantly agreed to act as their legal co-signer, leveraging my flawless credit score to secure a $57,000 consolidation loan to save their property. However, I firmly stated this action was my absolute final intervention while officially terminating all other forms of monthly financial subsidies I had been providing them for years. I naively assumed saving the roof over their heads would satisfy their endless greed, while buying me the freedom to focus entirely on building a secure future alongside Trevor. This strict financial boundary instead bred a deeply toxic resentment within my mother, alongside the simmering bitterness already consuming Jason. Their hidden anger reached a boiling point shortly after Trevor and I successfully purchased a beautiful modern apartment in the heart of Charlotte. They seethed with a sickening jealousy while watching us build a comfortable life, completely independent of their constant dramatic crises. Jason deeply resented my professional success because it highlighted his own constant failures, while my mother could not stand losing her most reliable source of endless cash. Trevor always encouraged my firm boundaries, which made him the primary obstacle standing between my family members trying to access my bank account. My maternal relatives quickly realized their financial well was drying up permanently unless they took drastic measures to eliminate my protective husband from the equation. They coldly calculated that the only effective method to regain total control over my income was to completely destroy the foundation of my marriage. They firmly believed a devastatingly painful divorce would shatter my mental state, while inevitably forcing me to crawl back to my old childhood bedroom in utter despair. Their ultimate goal was turning me back into their obedient financial servant, who would dedicate her entire salary to paying off their endless mounting debts. The horrific slander they eventually unleashed was never a random act of emotional cruelty, but rather a highly calculated financial weapon. They designed this malicious tool specifically to strip away my strongest emotional support system while isolating me in a corner of total desperation. The terrifying reality of their plot actually slipped out during a particularly heated phone argument when I explicitly refused to cover another one of Jason's overdue credit card bills. My mother hissed viciously through the receiver, screaming, "As long as you are with Trevor, you will never come back to help this family, because you have completely abandoned your own flesh and blood just to live in selfish luxury." I unfortunately dismissed her venomous words as a typical emotional tantrum, without realizing they were already fabricating the disgusting medical lies that would soon detonate inside my living room. They were perfectly willing to completely assassinate my character, just to ensure they never had to take responsibility for their own $57,000 nightmare. They spent weeks plotting the perfect moment to drop their fabricated evidence right in front of Trevor to maximize the destructive impact on his fragile ego. I remained completely oblivious to the gathering storm while focusing on my career, instead of watching the very people who shared my bloodline actively conspiring to destroy my entire existence. Last Friday night, every fake mask was officially torn away right at our living room dining table. I had reluctantly invited my parents alongside Jason for a standard weekend meal, hoping to maintain some fragile illusion of peace within our deeply fractured family. The evening initially progressed with tense, superficial conversations until the atmosphere abruptly shifted into a meticulously scripted character assassination executed by my own flesh and blood. They deliberately waited until the main course was completely finished before initiating the most devastating phase of their calculated financial warfare against my independence. Jason reached into his leather briefcase to produce a thick manila folder which he forcefully tossed directly onto the center of the dining table. The documents spilling out across the table were entirely fabricated medical records, featuring highly realistic clinic logos, alongside incredibly specific consultation dates, designed specifically to maximize their destructive authenticity. He weaponized those forged papers to present a horrifyingly false narrative, portraying me as a reckless woman who had been living a completely deceptive double life. Trevor immediately picked up the scattered pages while his facial expression rapidly transformed from casual confusion into absolute psychological shock. He stared at the fraudulent medical texts which falsely claimed I had terminated 4 separate pregnancies with 4 different men long before our relationship ever began. The sheer audacity of their lie was staggering because they utilized extremely personal details from my past to construct a believable timeline for their disgusting fabrications. My mother observed the growing horror on my husband's face before dramatically wiping away her non-existent tears to deliver her perfectly rehearsed performance. She looked at him with sickeningly fake sympathy while whispering, "I have kept this secret for the sake of our family honor, but Trevor, you need to know the absolute truth." Her venomous words hung heavily in the silent room as she masterfully played the role of a devastated parent burdened by her daughter's shameful hidden past. I remained entirely frozen in my chair, waiting for the man I had loved for years to tear those ridiculous papers apart and throw them back at my treacherous relatives. I desperately expected Trevor to defend my honor against such obvious slander, because a healthy marriage should inherently possess an unbreakable foundation of mutual trust. However, his profound blindness completely shattered my heart when he chose to believe a stack of forged documents over the faithful wife he had lived with every single day. He looked up from the fabricated clinic records to stare at me with an overwhelming mixture of revulsion and deep alienation that truly sickened my soul. His entire posture radiated an undeniable hostility that proved he had already convicted me in his own mind without requesting a single shred of actual proof. Trevor violently slammed the forged medical papers down onto the wooden tabletop while shouting, "How do you explain these specific names and dates?" That exact moment clarified everything regarding the incredibly fragile reality of my marriage, alongside the absolute moral depravity of my biological family. I looked directly into the coldly triumphant eyes of my mother and Jason, before slowly shifting my gaze toward the pathetic weakness constantly displayed by my easily manipulated husband. They all confidently expected me to break down crying while frantically begging for forgiveness over horrific sins I never even committed, just to somehow salvage my rapidly crumbling domestic life. I instead chose a completely different path by refusing to offer a single word of desperate explanation to individuals who fundamentally lacked any genuine respect for me. I calmly stood up from my seat before deliberately pushing my chair back away from the table in complete silence. I simply turned around to permanently walk away from that poisonous gathering, while leaving them sitting there celebrating their momentarily successful yet ultimately doomed conspiracy. Exactly at 7 o'clock the following morning, I stuffed all my essential personal documents into a large suitcase before walking out of that house forever. I drove directly across town for a remarkably brief meeting with my best friend Amanda, who silently handed me the keys to her vacant secondary apartment. This extremely practical exchange allowed me to establish an immediate physical separation from Trevor, without wasting precious hours desperately searching for a temporary hotel room. I refused to spend another single minute breathing the same air as a husband who chose to believe forged papers over his own faithful wife. I subsequently headed straight into the bustling downtown financial district to attend a highly prioritized consultation with my lawyer, Mr. Davis, to initiate my retaliation. We methodically outlined a preliminary asset division strategy to securely lock down my personal savings before Trevor could potentially attempt any unauthorized joint account withdrawals. The impending divorce proceedings were merely the initial step because my primary objective was completely dismantling the financial lifeline my toxic relatives thought they possessed. I instructed my attorney to launch a devastating legal counterattack by officially filing a comprehensive fraud report alongside a severe financial misrepresentation claim against my parents. These formal legal documents were specifically designed to permanently revoke my active status as the primary co-signer on their $57,000 property loan. I completely refused to remain legally bound to individuals who were actively conspiring to destroy my marriage through maliciously forged medical records. I opened my briefcase to hand over a massive stack of carefully preserved financial records, proving my father had intentionally inflated his corporate income over the past 2 years. Those detailed corporate tax discrepancies clearly demonstrated he had routinely submitted falsified revenue declarations to successfully maintain their active credit agreement with the national lending institution. My extensive professional background as a senior financial analyst provided me with the exact forensic knowledge required to expose his desperate accounting manipulation. I highlighted the exact monetary discrepancies hidden within his fabricated business ledgers to ensure the banking officials would instantly recognize the undeniable mortgage fraud occurring right under their noses. I meticulously explained how my biological family had purposely weaponized my flawless credit score while simultaneously plotting to assassinate my personal character to retain their illegitimate funding. Mr. Davis carefully reviewed the entire stack of banking records while nodding his head in complete professional satisfaction over the overwhelming evidence I had meticulously gathered. He looked up from the fraudulent tax declarations with a sharp legal focus to clearly state, "This loan is now legally vulnerable." I immediately grabbed a heavy ink pen to sign my name across the official complaint forms with an incredibly cold sense of absolute determination. I looked directly at my attorney while firmly commanding, "Submit it immediately. I want them to lose everything." The corporate banking system instantly received our electronically submitted dossier, which immediately flagged my maternal family's active mortgage as an extremely high-risk liability. Their automated security protocols swiftly activated an independent corporate audit team to thoroughly investigate the severe income falsification charges we had just leveled against my deceitful parents. The financial trap they had carelessly ignored while obsessing over destroying my marriage was finally snapping shut around their own greedy throats. I spent the remainder of that long afternoon legally transferring all my individual funds into a completely new secure banking institution. This aggressive financial maneuver guaranteed my absolute protection while ensuring the impending economic devastation would strike my treacherous bloodline without any possibility of mercy or negotiation. Exactly 2 weeks after I submitted my formal complaint, the banking legal system initiated its crushing machinery. The National Lending Institution officially issued a strict demand letter alongside a terrifying notice of acceleration sent through certified mail directly to the residence of my parents. These uncompromising legal documents explicitly demanded the immediate repayment of the entire $57,000 principal balance without offering any alternative settlement options. The corporate auditors additionally attached massive penalty fees citing their severe breach of the active credit agreement regarding intentional income falsification. The banking executives completely stripped away their standard monthly payment privileges because my formal withdrawal as the primary co-signer exposed their total lack of financial credibility. The regional bank manager personally authorized the immediate transfer of their mortgage file to a ruthless external collection agency specializing in aggressive property seizures. Utter panic erupted inside their household the moment the postal carrier required a physical signature for the devastating certified delivery. My mother carelessly ripped open the heavy corporate envelope expecting a routine account statement before reading the horrifying acceleration clause, demanding total payment within 30 days. The shocking reality of facing immediate property foreclosure caused her physical body to completely shut down right in the middle of their hallway. She experienced severe psychological shock before violently collapsing unconscious right onto their living room floor while dropping the legal papers everywhere. Their decades of calculated manipulation abruptly shattered against the uncompromising brutality of corporate banking regulations, which refused to accept fake tears or emotional blackmail. The sudden realization of losing their comfortable suburban lifestyle permanently paralyzed the very woman who had arrogantly orchestrated the destruction of my marriage just weeks prior. My cellular phone began ringing relentlessly throughout the late afternoon, displaying my father begging for attention through dozens of desperately missed calls. He frantically attempted to establish contact, hoping I would somehow show pathetic mercy by negotiating with the aggressive loan officers to withdraw the active foreclosure order. He desperately wanted me to reverse my formal fraud report so they could retain their stolen suburban property without facing the impending legal eviction. He flooded my voicemail inbox with frantic audio messages, promising completely empty apologies while attempting to shift the entire blame onto Jason. I finally accepted his 47th consecutive call just to permanently establish the absolute boundaries of our forever shattered relationship. My father screamed through the phone receiver with absolute panic, crying out, "Please save us because your mother fainted and is currently on her way to the hospital right now." His pathetic attempt to weaponize her medical condition failed to generate even a single ounce of sympathy within my hardened heart. I simply stared at my blank living room wall while delivering my final response with an incredibly icy tone that conveyed zero emotion. I firmly replied, "When you distributed those fake medical documents to force Trevor into divorcing me, did you ever consider this exact moment?" I immediately terminated the connection without waiting for his desperate excuses before permanently blocking his phone number from ever reaching my device again. I utilized absolute silence to permanently extinguish every single hope of further psychological manipulation from the toxic bloodline that actively tried to destroy my existence. Jason suddenly realized their total financial ruin was imminent, which prompted him to seek alternative funding options in absolute desperation. He shamelessly approached Trevor requesting an emergency cash loan to pay the banking penalties, but my estranged husband immediately rejected his ridiculous proposal. This ultimate financial rejection sparked a massive internal conflict within the very group of traitors who initially conspired to ruin my entire life. Early in October, the immense financial pressure began severely choking the lingering arrogance right out of my maternal family. Trevor unfortunately needed to return to their heavily mortgaged property to retrieve several remaining physical documents required for finalizing our separation. He casually requested permission to utilize Jason's personal desktop computer in the living room, just to quickly print out some missing legal forms required by his attorney. Jason carelessly agreed without realizing his digital workspace remained completely unprotected while he stepped into the kitchen to prepare a beverage. Trevor sat in front of the glowing monitor searching for his downloaded attachments when he accidentally opened an actively minimized folder resting on the desktop screen. He became absolutely paralyzed upon discovering a massive collection of original Photoshop files containing the exact clinic logos alongside the precise medical dates they had previously weaponized. The complex digital editing layers clearly displayed the meticulous process of altering standard blank templates into the devastatingly fake abortion records that had successfully shattered his trust just weeks prior. The final piece of their treacherous puzzle snapped perfectly into place when he noticed an open email application containing a lengthy message thread between Jason and my mother. Trevor began reading the blatant digital correspondence outlining their exact malicious strategy to systematically destroy our marriage using those fabricated medical lies. The emails explicitly discussed their absolute certainty that an abrupt divorce would inflict enough psychological damage to force me back under their complete financial control to pay their mortgage. They confidently plotted to utilize his predictable outrage as the primary weapon to drive me out of Charlotte permanently. A profound wave of sickening realization washed over Trevor as he finally comprehended the sheer magnitude of his own unforgivable stupidity. He recognized he had blindly fallen into a pathetic trap, perfectly engineered by greedy relatives, desperately trying to protect their $57,000 debt from the aggressive banking auditors. He had violently thrown signed divorce papers directly into the face of his completely faithful wife, based entirely on cheap digital forgeries he never even bothered to verify with actual medical professionals. The crushing weight of his catastrophic mistake physically dropped him into the computer chair, as his breathing became dangerously shallow. Jason suddenly walked back into the room expecting to collect the printed documents but instantly froze upon seeing his monitor fully exposing their extensive conspiracy. My mother rushed in shortly after hearing the sudden commotion, only to realize their meticulously constructed character assassination was now completely exposed to the exact man they had manipulated. They could not formulate a single credible denial against the undeniable digital evidence glaring brightly from the illuminated computer monitor. The concrete proof completely stripped away their fake parental concern, forcing them to stand there in shameful silence as their filthy scheme completely unraveled right before their eyes. They were totally trapped by their own careless digital footprint without any possible avenue for continued deception or emotional manipulation. Trevor stood up, clutching the printed emails with shaking hands, before loudly reading the exact words Jason had written to my mother. He stared directly into their terrified eyes before shouting, "If she divorces him, she'll come back." Jason turned incredibly pale while frantically backing away toward the front door, trying to escape the overwhelming confrontation. He raised his trembling hands defensively while desperately stammering, "Listen to me, Trevor. Everything is just a massive misunderstanding." Trevor completely ignored his pathetic excuses before grabbing his personal belongings to storm out of their residence forever. He finally understood the catastrophic damage his lack of faith had caused, but repairing our completely destroyed foundation was already an absolute impossibility. Late Thursday afternoon the following week, Trevor intentionally blocked my path right inside the corporate parking garage just as I exited the main lobby. He appeared incredibly haggard, wearing wrinkled clothing while completely lacking his usual professional engineering composure. I quickly learned his superiors had recently suspended him from his corporate position due to a severe mental breakdown that seriously damaged his professional credibility across multiple critical technical projects. They completely stripped him of his engineering credentials pending a full psychological evaluation because his personal life destruction had severely contaminated his daily workplace performance. His entire physical presence radiated a pathetic aura of absolute desperation as he nervously approached my vehicle with shaking hands, hoping to somehow rewrite history. He forcefully shoved several crumpled printed papers toward my chest, revealing the explicit digital Photoshop layers Jason had utilized to fabricate those disgusting clinic records. The printed documents explicitly displayed the digital timestamps proving Jason had meticulously crafted the entire fraudulent medical history on his personal computer merely 2 days before that disastrous family dinner. Trevor confessed the entire malicious conspiracy orchestrated by my parents to execute my character assassination before desperately pleading for me to withdraw our pending divorce petition to restart our marriage. He foolishly expected those printed digital confessions to somehow erase the horrific memory of him throwing divorce papers onto our dining table without offering me a single second to defend my own honor. Trevor grabbed his own hair while crying out with an incredibly broken voice. "I destroyed everything. Please give me one single chance to fix this horrible mistake." Amanda stood firmly right beside my shoulder, fulfilling her essential role as an exceptional pillar of moral support during this completely unwanted ambush. She physically positioned herself to maintain a strict boundary, ensuring Trevor possessed zero opportunity to step closer or utilize any physical intimidation tactics to corner me against my vehicle. Her protective presence guaranteed I remained entirely grounded without falling victim to his pathetic attempts at emotional manipulation, while he continued weeping over his own catastrophic foolishness. She completely ignored his desperate apologies while keeping her defensive stance locked in place until I finished delivering my final verdict. I looked at the printed digital evidence confirming my innocence, but felt absolutely no validation because the truth no longer mattered to our permanently dead relationship. I bluntly rejected every single pathetic apology spilling from his mouth by directly addressing the core failure of our entire union. I explicitly pointed out that the ultimate betrayal was never the forged medical documents themselves, but rather his fundamental lack of trust in his own wife during the very first minute of their malicious conflict. I reminded him that a legitimate marriage requires an unbreakable foundation of mutual faith, which he effortlessly discarded the moment my mother shed her fake tears. He chose to blindly believe incredibly suspicious papers presented by greedy relatives instead of trusting the woman who slept beside him every single night for the past 5 years. I looked directly into his tearful eyes, maintaining a perfectly steady voice to declare, "You did not destroy everything, you only permanently eliminated yourself from my life." I motioned for Amanda to continue walking toward the driver's side door, leaving him completely paralyzed by the absolute finality of my rejection. Trevor physically collapsed onto the freezing concrete parking surface as the devastating reality of his unforgivable suspicion finally crushed his remaining hope for reconciliation. He knelt there completely alone in the shadows of the corporate building, realizing the incredibly steep price of his blind gullibility had permanently stripped away the most precious foundation he ever possessed. I started the engine without looking back through the rearview mirror while pulling out of the parking structure to leave his pathetic existence behind me forever. On the remarkably quiet morning of Thanksgiving, a massive foreclosure notice was officially hammered into the front lawn of my former childhood residence. The uncompromising corporate banking system forcefully evicted my biological parents from their stolen property, leaving them wandering through a dilapidated rental complex in absolute poverty. They were brutally stripped of their fake suburban prestige while being forced to survive on minimal government assistance without having any access to my previously reliable bank accounts. Jason cowardly fled across state lines to avoid receiving a mandatory legal subpoena regarding his extensive credit fraud investigation, while completely abandoning our aging parents to face the severe criminal consequences alone. He selfishly prioritized his own freedom over the very family members who had recklessly mortgaged their entire future just to protect his failing business ventures. Trevor officially finalized our divorce paperwork, while continuously spiraling into a severe clinical depression, which ultimately caused his permanent termination from his prestigious engineering firm in Charlotte. He currently lives in complete isolation while constantly agonizing over the catastrophic mistake of choosing to believe a stack of forged documents over his dedicated wife. The stark contrast became incredibly apparent while I sat alone enjoying a peaceful Thanksgiving dinner inside my modern apartment, without enduring any toxic screaming matches or emotional manipulation. The profound silence filling my pristine dining room felt absolutely luxurious compared to the chaotic financial warfare I had recently escaped through my own legal determination. I permanently closed that horrific chapter of my existence to continue advancing my thriving corporate career while thoroughly discarding every single poisonous memory attached to my treacherous bloodline. I completely reclaimed my personal freedom by utilizing the exact financial system they tried to exploit, ensuring they could never again weaponize my professional success for their greedy benefits. I look forward to spending all my future holidays surrounded by genuine friends rather than treacherous relatives. This official Revenge Mode broadcast was specifically produced to provide essential educational value regarding the critical importance of establishing permanent personal boundaries. We aim to demonstrate how victims can successfully navigate severe family crises utilizing sheer rational logic alongside uncompromising legal protection. Bethany demonstrated extraordinary resilience by decisively severing all ties to protect herself against the malicious financial manipulation orchestrated by her own relatives. The treacherous villains ultimately suffered the catastrophic consequences of their greedy decisions when the banking system destroyed their fraudulent lifestyle. Her absolute refusal to forgive their unforgivable betrayal completely neutralized their toxic psychological control forever. Looking back upon this devastating journey, we must emphasize three critical lessons regarding family toxicity. Biological relation never grants anyone a free pass to exploit your finances or ruthlessly assassinate your personal character without facing severe consequences. Any marriage easily broken by fabricated rumors inherently lacks the fundamental trust required for a genuine partnership because unchecked suspicion destroys love instantly. Achieving total financial independence remains the ultimate armor for women facing sudden betrayal from their closest confidants. When you possess complete economic autonomy, you never have to tolerate abuse or beg for mercy from those who deliberately harm you. You can simply deploy the legal system to permanently sweep the garbage out of your entire existence while walking forward with absolute dignity. Thank you sincerely for patiently accompanying my personal journey on Revenge Mode until these final moments of absolute justice. Permanently severing contact with a toxic biological family is never an easy decision for anyone to execute. How exactly would you handle this devastating betrayal if you found yourself standing in my incredibly difficult position? Please share your analytical thoughts below the video before subscribing to hear more realistic stories.